Okay, let's record this now before this cold takes over and my voice becomes completely fucked and unusable. So, hey guys. As you may have seen with increasing frequency, it seems, at least to me, more and more comedians appear to be abandoning their positions and occupations as the makers of merriment to instead focus their careers on the enforcement and forwarding of certain political views. Which political views may those be? Well, is it really much of a question? Of course, far left-leaning, anti-Trump outright propaganda. While comedy always has had an element of the political, see George Carlin, for example. Given that expectancy violation is an important factor of what makes a joke humorous, and I will get into that in more detail in a moment, but I have already covered it numerous times in the past, as some of the most basic functions of comedy involve being surprised by what you're hearing. If it's just mundane and normal, it will not be funny. The fact is that in the current year, there is without question a new zeitgeist in the realm of comedy. Namely, not to be funny, but to be political, and sometimes to throw in a so-called joke that only those completely in line with your politics will find even passingly amusing. And then, not due to any inherent humor in the joke itself, again, it's not going to violate any expectations, it's quite the opposite, it's going to adhere to your expectations, but merely these jokes are a method of what we call social proof. That is, hello, I am Comedian Man. You know me, I am Comedian Man. Knock knock, here is a thing that you already believe in. Now, here, in your social role as an audience member, you are now required to laugh through the same psychological effect of social proof. Viewer at home, you all laugh. All laugh at the thing that I just said because you agree with it. Do you hear my audience laughing? Yes, you hear the audience laughing? That means that you too must laugh. And while social proof may explain a lot of what we see in terms of audience participation, the potential effects of comedians and comedy as it begins to intersect on a more in-depth level with politics and non-comedic topics potentially is far more dangerous, and for me, also far more interesting to discuss. So let's get into it. That is, we all understand on some level, I think at this point, maybe not all of us, but I think most of us, how social proof works. For more detail, of course, see Cialdini on Influence 1987. We all want to be part of the joke. Humans are a social species. Of course we want to be part of the joke. We want to be in on it. When we see others around us laughing, we too want to laugh. We want to be part of the social experience. More infamously, perhaps, hey, you ever watch an episode of The Big Bang Theory without a laugh track?
There's my pretty girlfriend.
I'm not going with you to Comic-Con.
What? Can't a man just be happy to see his woman and pat her on her second most erogenous ball and socket joint?
He can, but it's still not changing my mind.
Well, maybe what's in my pants will change your mind. It's a list of this year's panelists. It's long, isn't it?
Yeah, if you ever thought that that show was funny in the first place, pro tip, it's not. Doesn't it come off as painfully awkward now when there's no laugh track? Given that there is no social cue that it is now your turn to laugh in response to the things that you are perceiving on the screen. But again, the effects of psychology when it comes not only to comedy, but to our interaction with media in general, goes much further than merely that, merely social proof. What I have seen in increasing prevalence of late is the use of negative emotional appeals to pull the heartstrings of the viewer, not to make him or her laugh, but to inform her or him of how to feel about a given political topic. That's odd because that's not really been the history of late night comedy. While again, late night in particular has always had an element of political discourse, given the temporal nature of said programs reliant on current events and what is happening in the news today just to remain relevant, never before do I believe I have seen late night, supposedly comedic television been so overtly and inescapably politicized. That is, in the past, well, sure, Letterman would have made a few comments about an ongoing event in politics, maybe even a heartfelt mention of a tragedy, and sympathy towards those suffering.
But boy, it means something now, doesn't it? They put themselves in harm's way to protect people like us. And the men and women from the firefighters and the police department who are lost are going to be missed by this city for a very, very long time. And my hope for myself and everybody else, not only in New York but everywhere, is that we never, ever take these people for granted. Absolutely never take them for granted.
And of course, Saturday Night Live's Weekend Update has served the express purpose of mocking the political events of the day, every week since the 1970s. But you have to understand, these programs were primarily works of comedy first and foremost. They were works of fiction, if you will. They were a form of positive, humorous escapism. While comedic political shows are nothing new, that's for sure, in the likes of things from The Daily Show to The Colbert Report to more recently relative newcomers like Louder with Crowder, or, well, in my opinion, Tucker Carlson tonight, because, Jesus Christ, he's fucking hilarious. Being the premier comedy shows, and I am including the Tuck on that because he makes me laugh like no other. Those shows, though, are all inherently political first, and news-oriented first. Traditionally, on the other hand, late-night shows have not been explicitly political. They've been explicitly comedic and entertaining. I want to in this video then explain why we may be seeing a change in the orientation of these late-night so-called comedy shows, away from joviality and humor, and toward controversy, politics, and outright propagandizing, given the psychology that I believe is being utilized to influence the audience opinion and attitude as a process of persuasion theory. First, though, let's go over some of the stuff I've discussed several times before, as it is important as we go forward in the understanding of persuasive attempts potentially being utilized by these late-night supposed comedians in an attempt to influence the emotions and ultimate attitudes and beliefs of their audiences to keep them in line with, well, any real number of leftist agendas. Be it gun control, while touting some of the most insane, nearly incomprehensible, incredibly ignorant rigmarole about the legal status of various types of firearms.
We ought to have a real debate in this country about whether we want military weapons of war in the hand of every Joe who wants to go in and buy 30 of them. It is harder to buy cough medicine than it is to buy an AK-47 or 50 of them.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard.
A series of bizarre and excessively over-the-top emotional platitudes being laid at the feet of the sorest loser in all of American history, Hillary Clinton, by a series of celebrities because, after all, it clearly is her turn, and fuck the American people and our democratic republic and its long-term history of the Electoral College. It's her turn.
Thank you, Hillary, for being a constant beacon of strength, hope, and determination for me and millions of other young women. You've been a role model and an inspiration and a voice of reason in uncertain times. I could go on, but I'd like to get right to the point. Can I give you a hug? Yeah.
Or the subject of healthcare, because please think of the millionaire children who would have obviously been denied service, because that's how the fuck that works, and left to die over a genetic defect in our horrible, discriminatory system. Oh, alas, if only we had a universal healthcare system, that would never happen. Oh, wait, that's where that actually does happen. To the entire hashtag take a knee debacle shit show, because different millionaires from the ones I mentioned earlier, are really making a difference in ending the excessive policing by kneeling for the God Emperor.
Kneeling during the national anthem has everything to do with race.
Or what is and what is not appropriate towel-throwing etiquette in the aid of hurricane victims when you're a filthy cracker white devil.
Get some bottled water, some food, pack up some extra Atlanta Falcons Super Bowl t-shirts, and write them a check with our money, you cheap cracker.
Or just an opinion on how you should feel about Drumpy getting too scoopy of icy creamy. The answer, of course, is DEFCON 5 outright meme warfare. The point is, for any of these questions that I've just raised on current events that you may possibly have an opinion on are being brought up excessively and extensively on late-night so-called comedian and entertainment television with a new and added emotional intensity that I just frankly do not believe was previously so overt. Correct me if you think I'm wrong, but I do believe that before, like, for example, this cracker comment on Weekend Update, the most politically incorrect and emotionally charged statement ever made on Weekend Update was this.
Jane, you ignorant slut.
And that was 1979, when the likes of George Carlin were advocate for the very use of provocative humor and words that have become so normalized in the following years. You might say then, Aiden, since you talk about how humor is most effective when it's mildly offensive or insensitive and temporally relevant, again, you could see McGraw-Williams and Warren 2013 for more evidence of how humor has a certain sweet spot, which it absolutely is. Humor does have a sweet spot of offensivity. Well, of course we would get things like that on Weekend Update. Aiden, of course he would. And you're not wrong. You're not wrong at all. No, given Trump is the hot topic, it would be funnier to make an ostentatious joke about him than, well, pretty much anything else or any other subject that I could think of readily. But the issue I have is with the severity and the extremity of the emotion. When Dan Aykroyd called Jane Curtin an ignorant slut, it was clearly a joke about the animosity of these two anchors. What really goes on behind the scenes in a newsroom? Be it the insanity in your ear, or perhaps more similarly as a function of intentional humor between people that we don't typically see behind the scenes. For example, the scene from Airplane, a film from the same general time period of comedy, of the bickering of the intercom narrators.
Don't tell me which zone is for stopping and which zone is for loading.
Listen, Betty, don't start off with your white zone shit again.
This and the Weekend Update scene are funny because they subvert our expectations of professionalism, and as such, the anger is inherent to the joke being rehearsed between these two actors both in on the joke. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think that's what this is. I don't think these extreme emotional displays are intentional expectation violation for the purpose of humor, which in of itself, as I've said, is necessary for many forms of humor, if not kind of all forms of humor. A violation of what we expect. You can see Attardo 1997 for an overview of humor expectation violation and humor in general. What it does do is certainly draw screams of approval from the crowd, but that's because the crowd hates Trump and wants to hear a reaffirmation of the comedian's own hatred of Trump. That's not comedy. That's a display of in-group affiliation for the purpose of generating a greater sense of liking given the one of us paradigm that is inherent and intrinsic to human social identity. We always want to be part of a group, and we want to express our affiliation for a group to increase our liking across our fellow group members. This is not comedy, but rather for the purpose of persuasion, in my perception. And here's how I think that works. In the past, I've described several times the concept of parasocial interaction and parasocial relationships. For the seminal, see Horton and Wall, 1956, and for a greater overview, see Rubin, 1987. As a quick refresher course, though, for more detail, see my video on personalities on YouTube and parasocial interactions and parasocial relationships. I'll call them PSIs and PSRs from now on. The human brain is an astonishing mechanism, but one unquestionably based on a long period of natural selection and evolution over the course of hundreds of thousands of years. When you look at the length of the development of the human brain in comparison to the length of the time television has been extant, why, it's not even a blip on the temporal radar. As such, the human brain is not adapted to differentiate well between media figures and face-to-face interaction and communication. It's why we shout at the television as if there is some ability for mutual bilateral interaction when we know cognitively and intellectually that's just not the case. This is a basic process of cognitive heuristics, that is, subconscious functioning. We recognize media figures are not, quote, real, but we still, on some level, treat them as such. We're just not cognitively or evolutionarily developed to differentiate between media and reality. A single instance of a parasocial interaction is any event wherein we feel we are interacting with a media figure, including anything from shouting, "Look behind you!" to screeching at Don Lemon for being, well, Don Lemon. After a series of parasocial interactions, we can start to form what we call the parasocial relationship with characters or media figures. Some of my favorite characters, for example, would be, I don't know, Mulder and Scully from the X-Files. The most well-made, hey, I didn't say best, I said most well-made, science fiction television show of all time. I could tell you everything you would ever want to know about those characters, from their family and personal histories, these more merely quantitative details, to what we would consider to be very deep interpersonal information, such as their hopes, their dreams, their fears, their motivations, and their aspirations. I know exactly who Fox Mulder is. And while there is still some debate on whether or not we can have negatively valenced parasocial relationships, I think we can. See Don Lemon, or in a fictional context, Dawn Summers. Holy fuck, I have never hated a character more than Dawn Summers. So much excellent work in creating the perfect bitch storm, Joss Whedon. Excellent male feminism, as usual, coming from you.
Does anybody even notice? Does anybody even care?
No! But typically speaking, our parasocial relationships tend to be positive, in that we perceive these characters that we know as our friends, and that means that we like them. Jimmy Kimmel, Stephen Colbert, Jimmy Fallon, etc. have all built careers on being likable. And nothing is more likable than making someone laugh. Introducing positive emotions by inducing laughter obviously makes messages to the sender more likable in and of themselves. Add to this a long-term series of parasocial interactions with a personality, say one that we watch every single night on a program designed specifically and intended specifically to induce laughter and positive affect, well then it is no wonder why people love these entertainers, why they like these folk. They make me feel good. I feel as if I am their friend and they make me happy. And as such, now what do we have? Oh, the introduction of in-group membership signaling to further increase perceptions of similarity and liking. You can see Brewer 1999 on in-group love and out-group hate. And liking is astoundingly kind of a dangerous thing when you're talking about persuading someone. Liking is, of course, along with our social proof, one of Cialdini's most basic functions of persuasion, but liking can have some more complex outcomes other than what we might generally think of as the results of friendship effects. And moreover, outside of Cialdini, there is a ton of research on interpersonal liking. See James McCroskey's research on it. He's kind of the seminal, because interpersonal attraction can be social, it can be physical, or it can be task attraction. There's all kinds of attractions we can have to each other, but liking, well, liking is where I'm really concerned and where I'm interested in this avenue of thought and discourse. Specifically, what I want to talk about is something called emotional contagion. See Hatfield, Cacioppo, and Raspun, 1992, 1993, 1994. Well, there is a ton of research on it, and it will be cited below. Emotional contagion is a specific phenomenon where we mimic the physical manifestations of emotional responses of others with our own bodies. Ever notice that seeing someone smile a great, wide, gregarious smile puts a smile on your face too? That is a natural function of our evolutionary social psychology, and as such, emotional contagion is more prevalent in our interactions with our friends. We are more likely to smile, to frown, to cry when we see one of our friends doing that thing. It is a basic effect of the tribal and social nature of the human species to express empathetic emotional responses. There are also some other differences in how we likely are to be affected by emotional contagion. Specifically, individual differences in the use of self-cues. That is, those who emote more and pay more attention to their own self-emotions are more susceptible to emotional contagion. And in general, hey, sorry, I hope I don't get fired like James Damore, but gender is a factor as well, in that women tend to be significantly more likely to be affected by emotional contagion. Well, if you look at the similarities, women tend to be more emotive, people who use more self-cues are therefore more emotive, and both of them therefore are more likely to be affected by emotional contagion, to adopt the emotions of others. As I am explaining these differences, I do want to elaborate upon why I think some of them may be significant in import in the persuasive process being utilized by these media figures, namely in that I think there is a reasonable theoretical basis to believe that more liberal and left-leaning individuals are more likely to be susceptible to social contagion, as well as people who are high in social cues and women. Although as of yet, I cannot find any extant research that is published assessing any correlation between these two factors. I can instead forward a hypothesis based on existing data that I believe should be analyzed in more detail and thoroughly with a complete research project. What we do have, though, is that the research indicates that conservatives tend to be happier and more emotionally stable, while liberals tend to skew higher in neuroticism, and neuroticism is essentially a type of emotional instability. However, this difference, while statistically significant, is not great amongst groups. See Purton, Blacks, and Peterson, yes, that one, 2015. Other traits, in contrast, we see, for example, across liberals in this meta-analysis of personality traits include eccentricity, sensitivity, unpredictability, expressiveness, sensation-seeking, and impulsivity. See Carney, Jost, Gosling, and Potter, 2008. Moreover, we can look at the general moral foundations and the importance placed on certain morals and as they differ across the political spectrum. Moral foundations theory posits that all humans tend to hold the same values, we merely prioritize them to a greater or lesser extent, and the value we place upon certain morals is often associated with our political leanings. The 5 original moral foundations, posited as they were, are as such: harm and care, that is emotional concern for others; fairness or justice, that is a concern for rules and equality; in-group loyalty, that is the concern for kinship; authority, that is the concern for order under rule; and purity, which is a concern or an aversion to certain behaviors or concepts believed to be distasteful or potentially harmful to the group or the individual. Later research added a 6th foundation, which is the idea of liberty, which predominantly explained the initially difficult to quantify libertarian position on the political spectrum, but these 5 ones are the ones I'm primarily going to be talking about here. Graham, Haidt, and Nasek, 2009, described conservatism as positional, meaning often in opposition to something else and based on, for example, threat assessment and on a proclivity towards in-group fidelity, while liberalism is unconstrained and more emotionally based in the loci of moral concern. That is, while conservatives tend to score relatively high in their evaluation and concern with all 5 of the moral foundations, liberals tend to follow a distinct pattern of very high concern with care and harm and fairness, and very low on their concern with ideas such as loyalty, authority, and particularly purity. Again, we can look at the preoccupation with care and fairness, which similarly describe a more potentially emotionally based morality, not wanting to see someone suffer, not wanting inequality for anyone, even if that means a forced outcome-based legislation to force equality. And when we go back and examine that those who are more self-cued in terms of their emotional expressions, that is, people who are generally more emotive, as the Carney et al. Meta-analysis found, as well as more emotionally unstable, as the Burton, Plax, and Peterson analysis indicated, well, it would seem reasonable then to assume that, like women, liberal or left-leaning individuals who have more self-cues, who tend to be more emotive, may simply be more susceptible to emotional contagion because they are more emotionally expressive in general. Now, hang on, did you hear what I said? Emotionally expressive. That does not mean conservatives are not emotional. No, that's not what that means. I always feel sometimes like I'm taking crazy pills when I'm trying to explain this stuff. I'm not ever saying that conservatives or right-wingers are somehow like these pure, innocent babies. No, I'm just saying I'm trying to describe a thing that I'm observing because I'm an inductive, reason-based person. I'm trying to describe what I see in the media. So I'm trying to explain or come up with some kind of rationale for why the fuck I'm seeing this. And why the fuck I think I'm seeing this and why I think they're doing it is because, well, yeah, there seems to be some significant evidence that liberals are more emotionally expressive. Again, it doesn't mean conservatives aren't emotional, but as I have provided evidence for, liberals may be more likely or more open in expressing themselves, which, as I have indicated, is related to a higher proclivity to be affected by emotional contagion. Where emotional contagion falls into the question of this entire realm of persuasive theory, though, is this. For example, Howard and Gangler, 2001, found that participants who liked a dyad partner as a person were more favorable to a partner when the partner was smiling and they themselves favorable to the product they were analyzing, so long as the partner's visual expression was perceivable. Simply speaking, seeing someone we like trying to sell us something, be it an idea or a product, increases our liking and evaluation of that thing, particularly when we can see their facial emotions and expression. We've also seen that emotional contagion can tend to have a group ripple effect, in that contagion can be infectious not just to one individual in a one-on-one communicative instance, but can be effective and infectious across multiple individuals in a group interaction. Knowing what we know about the incredible effects of social networks thereby, this contagion of emotion has the potential to spread beyond a single individual parasocial interaction with a media figure and can easily extend itself across groups of individuals. See Barsade 2002. Further, negative emotions tend to be more contagious than positive ones. Therefore, it is easier to poison the well against a product or an idea using emotional contagion than it is to improve the evaluation of a product, as I've shown you can do, given that merely negatively valenced emotions are just more powerful in their ability to infect and affect others. See Rosen and Roisman 2001. What of course we are seeing most commonly with these late night comedians bringing excessive and detailed political conversations to their programs ostensibly designed to be entertaining is predominantly negatively valenced emotional outpouring, and that's disconcerting. Now, given that we know negative emotions are more contagious, that women and arguably leftists are more susceptible to the transference of affect, and given the increased liking that we see for public speakers, the process of the continued and ongoing parasocial interaction and parasocial relationships that are formed with the typically, or more accurately perhaps historically, humorous figures who we have every reason to like, particularly for leftists to like, given the recent displays of their in-group solidarity, knowing what we know about in-group love, there is every reason to believe that emotions being conveyed on screen by these, frankly, pundits at this point are going to be injected with syringe-like precision into the average viewer from their target viewer base. This means simply that when Jimmy Kimmel walks out on stage crying about gun control after Paddock gained villainy status on the strip Ave de Kaiser, the average viewer is going to catch the bug just as much as any gay man is about to catch the bug in California, since pausing's totally cool and just a misdemeanor now. Fuck me. That is, when you see Kimmel, or any of these bents on a Jimmy of another variety, of a Fallon variety, crying about how much they love Hillary Clinton, or when you see a man who spent over a decade developing an intensely loyal fan base by satirizing Bill O'Reilly drop his facade and go full retard, you never go full retard, with intense emotions in his anti-Trump hatred, well, guess what happens? Those emotions being portrayed visually with clear view of the facial expression of the figure are most likely going to be spread to the viewer base via emotional contagion. Now, why does any of this matter? A lot of this, as with many things in social psychology, falls into what I like to call the no shit factor, in that, yeah, Aiden, the whole point of this petty virtue signaling is to make people upset. And you're right, it is. But it's actually a little bit more heinous than that when we consider the ramifications of emotion contagion. Contagion goes beyond mere sympathy, that is, feeling for someone. It goes into empathy, that is, feeling with, feeling as someone. More importantly, the activation of emotional contagion means an alteration of the physical state. That is, the viewer's face may sour. They may shed a tear as Kimmel or Colbert screeches autistically about whatever their soapbox of the day happens to be. And this is important because of human psychology works in terms of long-term cognitive processing. Humans have a psychological desire for internal consistency. That is, we like to maintain an evenness in the things we think and we believe, and the things that we do over time. An aberration in consistency can elicit what we call cognitive dissonance, a feeling of psychological discomfort that comes from a disconnect between beliefs and actions, or between historical beliefs and actions and current beliefs and actions. See Bremen Cohen, 1962. This is important because it means that in the future, when asked to describe one's feelings on, for instance, universal healthcare, looking at how memories are accessed cognitively, this goes into the process of the limbic system, in that with a sort of coordination between the hypothalamus, which is more of the pleasure principle, the immediate emotional responses, and the hippocampus, which is looking at memory and information storage, well, then they go and look either to the right or left brain to understand where this information is being stored. More emotional information tends to be stored in the right brain, whereas more logical and rational information tends to be stored in the left side of the brain. In this instance, what's going to be activated is the right side brain memory storage. The emotional emotional storage. This also further activates the hypothalamus in response to the very broaching of the topic, given that it is an emotional one, as it has been stored within the cognitive memory. Well, in the case of Contagion, looking into memory to understand the emotions associated with a concept are going to be processed as internal. That is, that emotions that I physically express when I watch Jimmy Kimmel cry, those emotions and those expressions, well, they're now my own. They come from my own locus of control. Those were my emotions because I physically expressed them. This is a great way to sell a product because people generally want to believe that changes in their behavior occur and originate internally. You can look to persuasion techniques from really any perspective, be it foot in the door or door in the face or, well, fuck, any type of persuasive theory, in that we all generally like to believe that any change in our attitudes or behavior are due to our own thinking and feeling. This is also a method of mitigating or ameliorating the discomfort associated with cognitive dissonance. We look internally to justify and understand our beliefs, attitudes, and emotions, and where else is best to look to understand the self than our own history of emotional responses? Therefore, when a question about a topic is then raised, we look inward to understand and explain our beliefs and attitudes, and given we have previously experienced an emotional response, then that response is transferred to further understanding of the concept. In essence, internalizing the injection of emotion into a solidified, perceived as self-originated thought. One's opinions on healthcare, there, for example, when the topic is brokered, will activate long-term memories of these emotions physically expressed as a process of contagion, and in cases where an extant belief or opinion on a topic is not overwhelmingly salient, the expressed emotion may then be the dominant source of internal information of an attitude. In extension, this has the ability to affect even other opinions or beliefs outside of the initial emotional cognitive connection made through heuristic association of emotions and ideas through this sort of injected affective priming. That is, I see Jimmy Kimmel cry about his baby, how he would have suffered if he wasn't a millionaire, and instead would have been born in a far superior single-payer system that would have been so much better. And I like Jimmy Kimmel, and I agree with him politically as part of my anti-Trump in-group of associative ideology. Well, then, yeah, I am more susceptible to contagion because, well, I'm a woman, or I'm a liberal, and as such, I will cry along with Jimmy Kimmel. I will cry along with him. And when a week later, someone on Twitter brings up the topic of healthcare, by heuristic processing, I will recall perhaps my emotional response of crying, which we simply lack the consistent processing power needed to function as a species to recognize the myriad of heuristics that we use constantly and incessantly as a necessity of existence to not go crazy. In order to be able to function, we need heuristics. But in other words, I will bring up this emotion I previously felt as associated with my stance on healthcare. As a result, I will feel the same sadness associated with that memory and that processing, which I will perceive as internally oriented, and be outraged that someone would dare question the necessity of universal healthcare, processing mostly on emotion in recall. This establishes a base stance of attitude, and if we go further into social judgment theory, we can see how this infection of emotional contagion can spread systemically through a cognitive web of ideas and concepts. That is, once my belief of an idea has been emotionally associated, it establishes a baseline of attitude regarding that belief. According to social judgment theory, of course, for the seminal, see Sheriff and Hovland, 1961, but for further review, see Bremer, 1976, further attempts at persuasion and attitude change thereby will requisitely need fall into the category of one's latitude of acceptance of an idea or attitude or belief. What the fresh fuck does all that mean, Aiden? Well, it means that you kind of can't lead a horse to water if it thinks the water is a neo-Nazi conspiracy alt-right KKK group, I guess. You can only move people's attitudes so far through persuasion, at least auditory and logical persuasion, particularly when their attitudes are extreme or solidified. This is different and functions on an individual basis across individuals. It's not unilateral. As such, a good communicator is able to get a read on the current stance of his political opponent or debate partner or customer, most commonly, and tailor his argument to fall within the individual that he is trying to persuade. Latitude of acceptance. That is the region of ideas or concepts that would be acceptable to someone who already holds a certain stance. In contrast, ideas that are so far outside of the latitude of acceptance within what's called the latitude of rejection offered to that discussion or communicative partner may experience what we actually call the boomerang effect, moving that person that the message is being tailored to actually further away from the new idea being presented if it is too radically outside of the acceptance range. My point in bringing up this theory beyond just liking to inundate you all with theory all the time because I really like theories, is that this is how you radicalize someone relatively normal or non-committed into a political belief or set of beliefs. It starts with Jimmy Kimmel, who has made you laugh oh so often. He comes out on stage in a pool of tears, him or any of his ilk, lamenting that guns are easier to purchase than cough syrup. His shirt stained with the salt from his suffering tears, and his sincere and totally not scripted and acted concern. Then you, the viewer, for whatever reason, be it because you like the entertainer as a parasocial relationship partner, because you're a woman, and, well, as we've been over, women tend to be a little bit more emotional and more susceptible to emotional contagion, or because you are just, in general, more susceptible to emotional contagion because you rely more on self-cues. Regardless of any potentially spurious correlation between leftism and self-cueing, again, I don't have direct research for this, I only have a hypothesis, but if such a correlation exists at all, it is very likely that this self-cueing of emotion has something in common with leftism. And by the way, I will fucking do that research. There is no good reason that it doesn't currently exist, but moreover, you go out there and you have a liking towards Jimmy Kimmel, which has been incurred as a result either of this established relationship or really out of his mere comedy, which incurs and increases liking because comedy makes us laugh. Any of those variables mean a greater proclivity to cry along with Jimmy Kimmel. Later then, when you, the viewer, think about the Second Amendment, your brain recalls that crying that you experienced, the sadness associated with the topic. Well, obviously the Second Amendment is bad, therefore, and guns are bad. You know because thinking about it makes you feel dour, and that emotion is being internally assessed. And of course, as it is being internally assessed as a product of your memory, it must have originated internally. It could not have been an injection of external emotive concepts. For that is the purpose of our internal consistency principle. Of course now, you, the viewer, you now have a negative perception on guns, for instance, particularly given the greater contagion of negatively valenced emotions on this entire process, making contagion potentially more potent. Thus, with the activated negative emotions assisting in the formation of an attitude toward a topic, the latitude of one's acceptance of new ideas is relegated to those additional suggestions in line with the affective belief, in line with the emotions. As such, while the initial belief incurred from this emotional contagion will forward merely that guns are bad, for instance, a further conversation or argument will suggest not only are guns bad, but they should all be banned, that only the government should have guns, because that's totally not the precise thing that the founding fathers were concerned about or anything. No, not at all. Yes, each idea within this new latitude of acceptance, this new latitude of beliefs, becomes potentially palatable, while in contrast, an outside, particularly an out-group member, coming to this viewer, as we have just described, with an outside idea toward this emotionally informed attitude, with an idea that falls within the rejection margin, thereby will not only be dismissed, but potentially result in an attitudinal shift in the opposite direction via the boomerang effect. That makes it more difficult to provide contradictory information that might persuade an individual in the potential value of rival attitudes. But it means it's also easier to further slide this same viewer I have been describing further and further and further into pre-established attitudinal orientation. And this, dear friends, this is why these charlatans get up in front of massive audiences and cry their eyes out. Why they make racial epithets. Why they go on irate tirades talking about beating others up and generally screech autistically. It is all an intentional political persuasive attempt. The fact is that the left lost. They lost so badly when it came to Trump, and the majority of media is now designed to mitigate this loss by increasing solidarity with left-leaning ideology. In response, the late-night comedians, despite how left-leaning they likely always have been, must engage in this attempt to attract viewers to their political stance in a desperate attempt at the indoctrination into a mindset of their viewers. Of course, this is a bit dangerous of a way to go, the increasing political divisiveness of the nation meaning that at some level, no matter how much one may have historically liked Stephen Colbert, at some point the contagion is just not going to be enough. It's not going to have the effect. It's not going to incur the ongoing liking, as that ongoing liking is decreased because, my friends, the emphasis on humor is being abandoned. What I mean by that is, even those who have little political interest or few political leanings are likely to turn off from these late-night pundits because these segments intrinsically are not funny. They don't make anyone feel good, and as a result, they don't engender liking of the host, and as a result, they are less likely, in the long run, to result in complete emotional contagion or overwhelming emotional contagion across the entire viewer base. While this method will certainly work on some, the problem is, as I have said, the ones most likely to be affected are women, who tend to lean left, and potentially just left-leaning people in general, the demographic that already agrees with the narrative being distributed. That means very few people, even in the center, are going to fall for this as you remove the potential for humor itself to be quite pervasive and persuasive by removing the humor aspect of your humor show. Humor is one of the greatest teachers of information, in some ways, interestingly enough. You can see Good Boy et al. 2015 for an overview, but the overall findings illustrate that humor assists in the long-term storage and retrieval of information when it is related to the subject matter being discussed. Professors and teachers who use humor to make jokes about the subject they are trying to instill in students are simply more successful as instructors. Pedagogues benefit from the usage of humor, and if the point of these late-night hosts, pundits, is to teach something, to get a message across and make it stick in your brain, to specifically teach an attitude or an ideology, they would frankly be better suited to be funny, and to not engage in this negative emotional contagion attempt, despite how potent it may be, as we know it is, as that relies upon liking, and honestly, you're being very unlikable. Shit. Fucking A. I know I probably shouldn't give away the answers to this, but you know as well as I do that no media strategist is going to watch this video or pay any attention to the actual research that might better explain how to sell their ideas. But the current attempt is not based outside of psychology. It is in fact very much a concerted effort based on extant persuasion theories, as I believe I have explicated in full. It's just very thankfully misplaced and mismanaged, at least for the sake of your sanity and mine. If any of you have been wondering why all this time there has been this massive politicization of late-night comedy, well, I hope I've been able to answer the question and give a reasonable rationale for why that may be happening from the perspective of communication scholarship. Given, trust me, these shows are without doubt run through a filter of a bunch of communication degree folk who craft every episode and every message, and probably a lot of those people absolutely do understand those psychological effects. Likely not all, but a certain degree of them do. Yeah, that's precisely why I think this is happening. They understand this psychology. It's a designed attempt at emotional persuasion, and well, it just doesn't work on people like me. Well, I mean, it can, but it doesn't work on any person who's a little bit more aware. But trust me, like anyone else, I am very susceptible to emotional appeals and messages. I mean, all of my favorite movies are depressing as fuck. I like to just sit there and watch them while I cry. Hey look, I'm a real woman after all. The point is, I also do try, and that's all we can do, is try to do the best that we can as animals to figure out and understand and observe what at least I think I'm observing, or what maybe you think you're observing. This is inductive reasoning after all. In this case, I think I'm looking at a leftist persuasion campaign coming from once beloved entertainers, and you know, it's such an easy house of cards to shake the foundation of that people like Jimmy Kimmel not only are essentially defending Harvey Weinstein, a repeated molester and yeah, probably rapist, all because he's friends with him and a fellow in-group lefty, but outright is so in line with the cultural Marxism, if you want to call it that, of the mainstream, that he would likely never acknowledge that he, for example, once advocated against women's suffrage.
We're trying to stop the suffrage and the suffrage of women in this country.
Sir? I would be happy to sign.
Thank you very much.
You've saved the dolphins. Now let's stop the suffrage.
As well as repeatedly performed in blackface.
Carmelo read on TV about white people getting deducted by alien, sticking all kind of hell up their butt. And that's a damn thing.
Yeah, it's been a whole big shit show though, isn't it? On the other hand, guys, though, I think I've tried to explain this, and I think I've done the best job I possibly could, at least in, well, it's been long enough, has it not? If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe. I am Aiden Paladin, Altana Volt.